Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. Thank you so much for joining today's class. Today is all about royal icing, and we're going to be decorating beautiful sunflower cookies. We can go to the overhead camera and maybe you can see a better view. We will mainly be using the Satin Ice royal icing mix and some different food color gels, as well as the food color markers to give it some highlights and definition. So throughout the class, we'll go over some tips and tricks with royal icing. I also want to know, is anyone new to using royal icing? Do you decorate cookies regularly? Do you do it for fun? Is it a business? I like to know all of that fun stuff. So we can get started. I'll go through the supplies that we'll be using today. So for starters, of course, we will be using the Satin Ice royal icing mix. And this product is great because all you have to do is add water and it's ready in minutes. You also kind of get that sense of you're making it homemade because you have to mix it in the mixer and add the water, which is great, but you don't have to have powdered sugar or flavorings or anything like that. This is ready to go. You just have to add water. You can add flavor to this if you want. It does have a subtle vanilla flavor, but you can always add extra flavorings. I know common ones are a little bit more vanilla, lemon, or even like an almond extract. So this takes color and flavor extremely well. And the beauty about it is that you can add more or less water to change the consistency from piping to stiff consistency for flower work or like a thin consistency for flooding. Today, we are going to be working with the stiff consistency because we are going to be piping flowers. So this is a royal icing mix. I have brown sugar cookies here. I have the two different food color markers. And the reasoning for the two different ones is because I wanted the orange, which is in the neon set, and then I wanted the yellow, which is in the brush set, because that's how we're going to get the nice little highlighted colors on top of these cookies. And I have some different spatulas, some small bowls so that I can mix the colors in, some scissors so I can cut the piping bag. I also have this brush that I'm going to use to help blend the colors together when we brush on the markers. And some food color gel. We'll be working with the golden yellow, which is the most perfect sunflower color, and the brown for the center of the flower. I'm also using this leaf piping tip. I know all of the names are different, or the numbers. So the one that would be at Michael's would be the 352 leaf tip. I had it written down just to make sure I didn't forget it. So it looks like this, and that's going to give us our petals. Then I have some piping bags. I like to use the kind that is a one and done, and you just throw it out because it's easier to clean up. So I'm not using a reusable one. I'm using just the plastic kind, but a nice heavy duty so that the icing doesn't break through. I also have wet paper towels, partly because I don't have access to a sink right next to me, so I will be wiping my hands. So I'll be wiping my hands with this, and then as well as covering the bowls with a damp towel once the icing is mixed, because it tends to dry out if it's left to open air. And then I also have some dry paper towels as well. So we can get started. Oh, I forgot to mention, I also have a KitchenAid mixer here. You can also use a mixing bowl and an electric mixer, but I find it easiest with a stand mixer and the paddle attachment. Okay, so let me just hook up paddle attachment and clear some space, and we'll get started with mixing the icing. Let's see how easy and fast it is to make an amazing batch of royal icing. So all you have to do is take the food safety seal off, and then pop the top. Slowly, because this is powder, just slowly pour it into your bowl. I like to even save this container because if you have leftover frosting, you can put it in here to store it. So I'm just going to place this to the side and push this a little closer so you can see in the bowl. Okay. So now I also have, I don't know if I mentioned this, I have the warm water for the royal icing mix. On the packaging, we have a 1/4 cup of warm water to the whole container. I like to place the water in with a tablespoon just because royal icing can be very finicky with the amount of water that you add. The tiniest addition of water can make a difference in the consistency of your royal icing. So when I'm mixing a lot, I'll start from the beginning with a full tablespoon, but as it gets to the point where it's starting to mix and combine, then I'll really, I won't even add a full tablespoon. I'll add like a drop and a drop here and there. Some people like to even use a spray bottle with water when they're making like a flood consistency or a piping consistency because of how finicky the royal icing can get when adding water, because you can add too much water very quickly. So it's best to do a very small amount at a time. So we do say a 1/4 cup, but like I said, I'm going to add it with a tablespoon at a time just until I reach the perfect consistency. And you'll know exactly what I'm talking about when we start mixing. So to start, to get it moving, I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of this water. And again, this is warm water. And I'm going to begin mixing on medium speed. And I'll shut the mixer off to talk as well in between each. Okay, so I'm going to add another tablespoon of water because it's not quite enough. So this is a total of 3 so far. Okay, at this point, you can start to see that the water is starting to allow the royal icing to clump together, but it's important that you pay attention to the bottom of your bowl, and you just want to make sure that no dry ingredient is getting stuck at the bottom. You want to make sure everything's incorporated. So I'm just going to take my spatula and really make sure that it's not getting stuck so that everything gets evenly incorporated. And it helps to have clean sides of your bowl with royal icing because royal icing does dry quickly when it's exposed to air, and then you'll have crust on the side, and that will make the icing not smooth if it gets into the nice and smooth part of the frosting. So I'm just making sure that the spatula or that the paddle attachment is nice and clean. And again, just making sure the bottom of the bowl is clear from the powder sticking to it. So good. Now I'm going to start mixing again, back on medium speed, just to help incorporate this a little bit more, and we will start to add more water if needed. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see this, but I can see that this texture is going to be too crumbly, so I'm going to have to add a little bit more water. If I can pick it up and kind of mold it almost like it's fondant, it's way too thick. So I'm not going to add a full tablespoon to this, but I'm going to take some water and I'm just going to do a couple drops at a time until this starts to move together nice and smoothly. So far I have probably used 3 tablespoons and maybe a half a teaspoon of water to get to this consistency. And I'm liking where it's at because it's starting to all incorporate together. So now I'm just going to let it mix on medium speed for about a minute. I'm just going to stir the bottom again just to make sure it's all incorporating nice and even. Okay. So now the goal is to get this a little bit more fluffier. So I'm just going to continue to mix it on medium speed. I also want to add that depending on the environment you're in, you might feel like if you're in a humid environment, you may not end up needing to add as much water as everyone else. If you are in a drier environment, you may seem to have to add a little bit more. You might see me just add like a couple of drops here and there, and I'm literally just doing a tiny drop because like I said, a little bit will go a long way. Just until it gets to a stiff consistency that would hold a pipe. That's what we're looking for. Okay. So let me just smooth it around with the spatula and I'll see if it's the right consistency. So you'll see if you pick it up with your spatula and you can do this with it, it's not going to drop, it's not too flimsy. That looks like it's a really good consistency. And if you kind of move your spatula around and if a peak forms, that's also a good sign. Okay, so now I'm going to transfer some into my bowl and color it with the golden yellow. Attachment. How's everyone doing so far? Does anyone have any questions?
So far, so good.
All right, great. So now I'm just going to transfer some of the icing into my bowl. I have a really small bowl, but it works perfect. And I will transfer a little bit less because we're not going to need much brown. So I could probably even do less than that. But then I'm just going to put some in another bowl so that we can color it brown for the center of the flowers. And when you're mixing the colors, and if you think that your frosting is too stiff, you can definitely still add tiny droplets of water if needed. And at this point, this is when someone would probably start to use a spritzer bottle because it would really use the most minimal amount of water. Okay, so I have a good amount in this bowl and a small amount in this other bowl. One will be used for the golden yellow and one will be used for the brown. Any extra frosting that you have in your bowl, you can either transfer it to a Tupperware or leave it in this bowl. And then put a wet paper towel over it, and that's going to hold the moisture in. And we'll talk more about the storage about this, like if you have any left over, but for now, when you're not using the icing, I like to just drape the towel over the bowl to lock in the moisture and to not allow any air to hit it. So I'll do that for now. And then also for the bowl that we're not coloring right away, I'm going to do the same thing just to make sure no air gets into there. So first we'll color the golden yellow, and we will be using the Satin Ice Golden Yellow Food Color Gel. And I believe mine is open already. So mine is open already, but a tip that you can do for when you're opening food color gels, I know it can be annoying to rip off the food safety seal. So what you can do is, like I said, mine's open already, so I can't really show you, but you can flip open the cap, and this tip right here, you can put over the top of the food safety seal, press down, and it will poke a hole right in the center. And then you can screw the cap right back on. This way you don't have to worry about ripping the whole food safety seal off. It's a nice and easy little tip. So first I'm going to start just by adding, like, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 drops into this bowl of icing. You can always add more, but it's harder to take away. So I'm just going to start with 3. And I'm going to start mixing it up. But this royal icing mixes up to a really bright white color, so it accepts other colors really well. And another tip for when you're working with the royal icing and you're coloring it, I like to color it at a stiff consistency, because that's when you're adding a little bit of moisture in with each drop of the food color gel that you're putting in. So you can always just add more water after to get it to the right consistency you need, in case the food color gel adds too much water content. So I'm definitely going to add more food color to this, but I think I want to, I'll do that at the end actually. I'm going to do like, try 3 more drops. So I want a nice rich golden yellow color. 1, 2. And what's great about the food color gel is that the tip, the top of this allows you to do drop by drop. So you can measure the amount of color you're adding so that you can get the same color every time, if you remember how much icing you were coloring at the time, which is great. And we also provide color mix guides online as well. So you can create a bunch of different custom shades. Another tip too, when you're adding the food color gel to any icing, the color will develop more over time and as it dries. So that's always something to remember. I know that a lot of people actually pre-color their icing a day before, just to really let that color develop. Okay, so see how this consistency is like this? It's holding a peak. That's exactly what you want. But you don't want it to be too stiff that you can't pipe it or squeeze it. I'm going to add the tiniest little drop of water just to help it a little bit. So I'm going to hold this up to show you how little water I'm using. A couple little drops. I'm just going to mix that in. Just because I don't want it too stiff that my hand is going to hurt too much when I'm piping it. Okay, so now that we have that mixed up, I'm going to cover this bowl with a damp paper towel and move on to the next bowl to color the brown. So for this, we'll start with, again, we'll do like 3 drops. We'll see what we get. I would like my brown to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to add a couple more drops. And you definitely want to use gel food coloring rather than a liquid food color gel when coloring royal icing, because of the fact that it's very finicky with the adding of the extra moisture. I'm just going to add a couple more little drops of water to this one just to make sure it doesn't hurt my hand when I'm piping, but not too much that it's changing the consistency by a lot. Still want it to be like a stiff piping consistency. Okay, that's great. So now I'm going to transfer the icings into my piping bags. For the brown, I'm actually not going to be using a piping tip. I'm just going to put it into the bag and we'll just cut the end because we're really just making little dollops in the center. So you don't need a special piping tip for that. Just want to make sure you're going to get all the icing into your piping bag. And then so you're able to press it down, we're just going to cut a really tiny hole at the tip. Not too much that you're going to draw out any product yet. I just want to make it so that some air can get into the bag so we can press it all the way down, just like that. Okay, so next we will add the yellow to the piping bag. Let me just check the consistency. Just want to make sure that it's not too thick. The main goal for the frosting or the royal icing that you're going to be using to pipe the flowers is that it's going to hold a stiff pipe. But like I said, you don't want it to be too stiff that it's way too hard to squeeze out of the piping bag. Okay, that's great. And now I'm going to be putting the leaf tip, which I said at Michael's, it's the 352 leaf tip. And I'm just going to place this at my piping bag. And when you're cutting the hole for the piping tip in the piping bag, you just want to make sure you're measuring correctly so that the piping tip doesn't squeeze through. So you don't want to cut too big of a hole. So what I like to do is I like to push the piping tip all the way down to the end of the bag and kind of see about where I have to cut for the tip to get out of the bag. So I'll measure quickly like that, and then I'll push it back up. And then cut across. Push down. It's a nice snug fit. And then when I fill my piping bag, there is a trick where you can put your piping bag into a tall glass and kind of roll the sides down over the edge of the glass, and then it creates a nice little cup for you to add to scoop your icing in. Another way, I like to fold the piping bag and then kind of cup it and put the extra rolled piping bag down the sides of my hand, so it creates a little cup like that. And then I'll just use my other hand to scoop the icing in. And you don't have to put all of the icing that's in your bowl into your piping bag at once. It might be easier for you to handle if you don't do that. So just remember, if you don't, you'll want to just cover up your bowl. So I have some leftover icing in my bowl, so I'm just going to make sure the sides are scraped nice and clean. And I'm going to cover it again with my wet paper towel, just for the time being, in case I have to use it again. Okay, so we can begin making our sunflower sugar cookies. So we can do several different kinds. I also have, these are what the end result is gonna kind of be with the two-tone from the markers. So I did these a little while ago, but I also, before this class earlier today, I had made some so that these would be dry enough so that I can show you how to make the highlights with the marker. So you can see there's different kinds I did here with like more flat, long petals, and then some that are shorter petals that are kind of raised up and have movement. And here's another example of the shorter petals. And here's an example of more of the long petal styles. So I'll show you the different techniques to get both. And this is kind of a mixture of the two. So I started with long and then I ended up with short as I got to the center of the flower. And then I did some that were just like half of a sunflower, which is a cute, different design. So I'll lay these here and we'll begin our first cookie. So you're going to want to hold the icing bag so that the piping tip is this direction, not vertical. You want the tip to be horizontal so that you create a petal-like shape and it's not going to be up and down like this. You want it to be flat like that. Okay, so we're going to start on the outer edge of our cookie. And basically you're going to just hold it. Let's see which ones we're going to do first. We're going to do the shorter petals first, the ones that are more upright and have a little bit more movement. So to do those, you're not going to hold it flat up against the cookie. You're kind of going to have an angle, like an upright angle, and you're going to squeeze, squeeze, squeeze until it gets out, and then stop squeezing and then slowly pull away. And that's going to create your little petal. And because we have that stiff consistency, it's holding its shape and it's staying upright. So we're just going to continue to do this all the way around the outer edge, and then we'll continue each section as we move to the center of the cookie. So right next to that, I'm going to squeeze, stop squeezing, slowly pull away. Oh, mine doesn't want to stick to the cookie. Let me redo that one. Okay. Squeeze, stop squeezing, pull away. Squeeze, stop squeezing, pull away. You don't want to be squeezing as you pull away because you're just the royal icing is very elastic. So it will still keep moving as you're pulling away if you're squeezing. So you want to stop squeezing before you pull away. And some might look different than others, but it's fun because it gives it the movement of a real petal. So for these ones, again, these are shorter ones and they're more upright. So I'm just going all the way around. I'm holding my piping bag more at an upright angle and I'm squeezing, stop squeezing, slowly pull away. So this is what it's looking like so far. Squeezing, stop squeezing, slowly pull away. So we've made a complete circle around, and now we're going to begin going towards the center of the flower and making more rows of petals. And we are going to continue with that same technique of keeping the piping tip upright, squeezing, stop squeezing, and pulling away slowly.
Hey, Sarah, here's
Yes.
a quick question asking, how do you secure the top of your bag so the icing doesn't squirt back into the opening?
Yes, so you can do a few things. I just leave mine, but you just want to make sure that your icing is, of course, squeezed all the way down to the bottom, and it helps to kind of give your piping bag a twist and hold it at that twist, and hold it like this in your palm and squeeze from up here. Try not to squeeze in the center of it like this, because that will cause the icing to move up to the opening. So it's important to hold it at the right, where the icing stops, twist it, hold it there, and that's gonna cause you to push the icing down. Whereas if you hold it in the center, you're going to squeeze icing down and up. I know some people also like to tie like a rubber band around this too, so it stays shut, but it can take some practice too. So if you want to practice these piping styles, you can also do it on a piece of parchment paper or a plate or anything like that. I also want to mention that every time that you start piping, you want to make sure that your tip is nice and clean and that there's no extra icing hanging off the top, because that will crust over really quick. And that's the beauty of royal icing, is that it does crust over, because then you're able to package these up, you're able to stack the cookies. Whereas if this was buttercream, it would crust over, but it wouldn't dry firm so that you could package it in a bag. Okay, so we're going to begin going into the center of the flower. So we're going to do another row, and I'm just going to hold it upright, start squeezing, stop squeezing, slowly pull away. And it's okay if some of the petals fold over a little bit. It's fun if they have different movement. I was thinking it would be really pretty if some of these were different shades of golden yellow, if some were darker, some were lighter. I know there's those really pretty sunflowers that are even more kind of black and red. Those would be really pretty. So I did my second row, and I'm going to do my third row again, repeating the same process. So squeezing, stop squeezing, pull away. And again, my piping tip is upright rather than laying flat on the cookie. And that's helping achieve the movement for these shorter petals to kind of stick a little upright and maybe flat back a little bit. So I'm just going to continue in a circular motion all the way until there's a small space in the center, and that's where we will fill in the center of the flower with the brown royal icing. It would be really pretty too if you gave the center of the cookie some texture, if you pressed some of the brown chocolate sprinkles in the center too. It's another fun idea. So I have about that much space in the center of mine, and now I'm going to start adding the brown royal icing. I saw someone ask a question. I think they were asking what direction to hold the piping tip. So I'm holding it more of the horizontal way, not upright like this. So not this way, you want to hold it flat like that, not pointy like that, flat. And then when I'm piping for these short upright style petals, I'm more at an upright angle. and then squeezing, stop squeezing, and then slowly letting go. So for the center, I'm just going to cut a little bit off the end of the brown piping bag. And really, we're just going to be making really small little dollops to create that textured center of a sunflower. So I'm just, for these dollops, I'm just squeezing. Again, I'm stopping squeezing and then pulling up slowly. And the reasoning for that is because the royal icing is more on the elastic side, which is a good thing, because that's how it allows for people to do string work and piping different lines on cookies. So that is a really good thing for the royal icing to be more elastic, but you just, it's just a little bit different than working with buttercream because of that. So you always want to make sure that you stop squeezing before you pull away. So there we go, we got one cookie down. And the thicker the consistency of your royal icing, the faster it will dry. I always recommend leaving your cookies out overnight for at least, especially for this, the thicker, at least 12 hours. If you were flooding cookies, some people like to say up to 24 hours to 48. They like to make sure that it's super set up and not going to smudge or make any fingerprints when you put it in any packaging or stack them in any way. Okay, so next I want to show you how to do the longer style petals. So all we're going to do for this is we're going to squeeze a little bit longer and we're going to hold the piping bag more on an angle, not an upright angle, more down so that it's more flat against the cookie. So I'm just going to wipe this excess icing that's hanging off the tip of the piping bag. And again, we're starting with the outer layer, but because we are going to be making longer petals before we started like right at the edge, since we're making longer petals, we're going to start more like maybe about ½ inch in from the edge of the cookie. You can see where I'm starting mine right there. So I'm going to squeeze, keep squeezing slowly, and I'm going to stop and then slowly pull away. Because you don't want the petal to be too much off the edge of the cookie. And so we're just going to continue that. So squeeze, 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 stop squeezing, slowly pull away. So this is more of a flat, longer petal. So we're just going to repeat this all the way around the cookie. So again, before we were holding it more at an upright angle, and now we're holding it more flat against the cookie. So for these, we're holding it flat, we're squeezing more, stop squeezing, slowly pull away. So that's the first layer. So we're just going to continue that with the second layer. This one you'll find won't have as many layers either because we are starting a little bit further into the center of the cookie. So again, we're just going to repeat that process. And I like to start in between where two petals overlap. So I'll start there and I'll start squeezing. Stop, slowly pull away. So we're just creating different layers of petals. So I think we could do another round. So we'll have 3 rounds of the long petals. So we're just gonna squeeze a little bit longer, stop and pull away. And then once you get to the way center, it might be pretty to do some of the shorter upright style petals. So at this point now, I will hold my piping tip more upright and I will do short squeezes, stop, pull away. Just a little bit in the center. So it's like that. And then we can add our little brown dollops to the center. And again, to get these colors, I used the brown satinized food color gel and the golden yellow. And you can go as dark or light for each of them as you want. Okay, so far we did the short style petals, short and upright style petals, and then we did the longer flat style petals. So this one looks more layered, this one looks more flat. Both are really pretty. And then I did another one where I kind of did a combination of the two. So I started with the longer petals. So I did 1 round of that. And then to get to the center, I did more of the short upright petals. So that's what we'll do next. Again, you want to make sure all your icing is pressed down. And then I'm just going to give it a twist and I'm going to hold the piping bag like this to make sure that I'm squeezing the icing down and not up. Okay, so for the next one, we're going to do a combination of the petals. So we're going to start with the long ones. So again, we're going to start kind of about maybe like 1/2 inch in from the edge of your cookie. We're going to start squeezing just until about you get to the edge of the cookie. Stop squeezing, slowly pull away. We'll do this all the way around the cookie. This would be pretty really with any color as well. It doesn't have to be sunflowers. Okay, so we're only doing 1 layer like this of the long flat petals. Like that. And then the next, maybe we'll do like 2 or 3 layers of the short upright petals. So now at where we began the first layer, we'll start the next and we'll start with our piping bag more upright and we're going to squeeze shorter and we're going to slowly release. So squeeze, stop squeezing, slowly pull away. And again, we're more upright angle. So that's giving us a different petal. And we're just going to continue that until we get closer to the center. So we're going to hold it more upright. And again, the piping tip is flat like this. It's not up and down. It's like this. So I'm just going all the way around till I get to the center. And then we will pipe the brown center. And all I'm doing for that is I'm just doing small little dollops. So the next one, we can do the flour that is on just half the cookie. And this could work really pretty even on a square cookie as well. So for this one, we can do any style technique. We can do the shorter petals or the longer. I think I'm going to do the shorter. And we're going to start in the center of the cookie rather than the outer edge, because we're only going to do half the cookie with the flour. So I'm going to find the middle, the center of the cookie, and I'm going to start at one edge. And again, I'm going to hold it more at an angle, and I'm going to squeeze, stop squeezing, slowly pull away. Squeeze, stop squeezing, slowly pull away. And we're going to kind of make kind of a half circle. And we're just going to keep layering until we get closer to the edge. So we're holding the piping tip more at an upright angle, squeezing for a short amount of time, stop squeezing and slowly pull away. And we're doing half of a sunflower. So it looks like this so far. So now at this point, I'm going to do center. So for the center, I'm just squeezing, stop squeezing, slowly pull away. Same thing, but without a piping tip. So it's just a little round dollop. And it makes it look like it's the seeds. Okay, so now I want to show you guys how we will do the highlighting of the petals. And the ones that if you're doing this with me right now, you can maybe go back to the very first one that you did, because the petals, you could probably actually touch your petals and you can tell that they're kind of starting to harden. I would still advise that you wait for your flowers to dry for several hours before you can start going in to do the highlighting, shading with the markers, just so that you don't ruin the flowers. You want to make sure that they are dry. So that's why I did some earlier, so that I know they're dry, to demonstrate for you. Okay, so, but like I said, if yours is starting to get dry, you can do it with light pressure, try to. If not, you can just watch and then do it in an hour or so. Okay. So for this, we are going to be using the two food color marker sets, the neon and the brush. And the reasoning for this is because I needed yellow and I needed orange. Both of these are great sets anyway. We also have the primary bold and the primary fine tip as well. These are game changer for cookie decorating, cake decorating, anything with fondant or hardened royal icing, because it really elevates your desserts. So it's a lot of fun. So it's very important that you use these markers on surfaces that have hardened or are dry, because if you try to do it on, say, buttercream, it's going to dig right into the buttercream, and then that will affect the tip of the marker and how it will perform later. So just want to make sure that you're using it on the proper surfaces. Okay, so I'm going to do this on a cookie that I did earlier today that are set. So I'm going to actually get 2 markers out at a time. So this is the yellow, which is from the brush tip, which is more of, looks like kind of a paintbrush. And then I'm going to get out the orange from the neon set. Okay, so we're basically just going to be doing some shading. So first, I want to be able to blend these 2 colors together a little bit. So first, I'm going to just brush some of the yellow onto the petal. And you don't have to do this on every petal. You could just do this on some. And alone, the yellow will kind of give it some highlight because it is a different shade of yellow than the golden yellow we used on the cookie. So what I'm doing here is I'm just brushing some with the yellow, just lightly. You don't want to use heavy pressure, and you don't have to either because the ink flows really nicely out of these markers. I'm not sure if you're even going to be able to see where I'm doing it. But the way that you would blend this, so after you brush it onto one of the petals, then you would take a little bit of the orange and literally just do like a couple dots while the yellow is still wet, and then brush with your paintbrush. So first you put on the yellow layer, and before that dries, so that it blends nicely, you'll just do like a couple dots of the orange. Use your brush to blend it. And like I said, you can do this on some of the petals and it will just give it more of a realistic look. So I'm lightly brushing with the yellow brush tip food color marker. And like I said, you can even do some that are just the yellow because that also adds a really pretty highlight. So that's what I'm going to just do for some of these in the center. And these flowers look beautiful without even doing this step, but like I said, it's just a little extra. So I'm just lightly brushing some of the yellow on some of these petals, and then I'll show you again what I would do with the orange. So after I brush this with the yellow, while the yellow food color marker, the ink is still wet, I'm just going to put some dots of the orange on top, and then use my brush to blend it. So this is why I also love the food color markers, is because you don't have to actually draw a full-on picture. You can just use it for little details. And again, you'll want to do this when your cookies are nice and set. You can make some that are more orange than others. I'm just going to get this cookie done, and then I'll show you side by side the difference that it does. Hopefully it will show up on the camera. It's hard to see. Again, some I'm just brushing with a straight up yellow. Some I might leave alone. And then others, after I brush the yellow, while the yellow is still wet, then I will put a couple dots of the orange. Use my paintbrush and lightly brush the colors to blend a little bit. Again, all you need is light pressure. That's especially why I like to use the brush tip for this, because you can use the side of it and you're not actually digging the tip into the icing. You're kind of just using the side slightly. Yep.
There's a question asking you to explain, I think, the use of the pencil again, or the markers.
Okay. Okay, so the use of the markers is not, you don't have to use them. It just adds a nice little touch to the end because it gives it some highlight. So I'll show you here. These might show up more because I went a little heavier on the orange than these ones, but it just adds a little highlight to them. So this one's has some on it as well. So it deepened the color a little bit. So it went from, I don't even know if you're gonna be able to see it too much on the camera, but this one doesn't have any food color marker on it and this one does. And it just gives it more highlight and depth. And the way I'm doing it is I'm using it on cookies that I did earlier where the icing has hardened. And I'm just brushing lightly. And that just changes the tone of the icing a little bit and gives it a different pop of color and different highlights. And then what I was doing with the orange was while the yellow is still wet, I just add a couple dots to that with the orange. And then I use a paintbrush and that blends the two together to create more of a golden yellow. So you can see right there, that's what I did. But again, that's just an extra step. You don't have to do that. It just makes it look a little bit more realistic. When you're done with your markers, always make sure that you close them tight so that they don't dry out. I also want to talk about the storage of the royal icing too. So with that. So earlier, like I said, I had some extra royal icing in my bowl and I placed it to the side with a wet paper towel over it. Like this, just in case I ended up needing more, but I didn't end up using it. So now I can take the container that the royal icing mix was in, or you can use a Tupperware container, anything that is airtight and closed, because like I said, as the royal icing is exposed to air, it begins to crust and get hard because that's what it's supposed to do. So that's why these cookies, you have to allow them to dry before packaging them or stacking them. But the stiffer icing does dry quicker. So that's a perk of using the stiffer frosting. But if you have leftover, just put it into your container of the royal icing mix or a Tupperware. And then what I would really like to do is put saran wrap directly on top of this so that it really remains that it's airtight. And I like to make sure that the edges of the bowl that I'm keeping it in doesn't get any royal icing on the sides because that will end up crusting because it's exposed to more air down up here. So I like to put it in the Tupperware or whatever, any container that's airtight, and then put saran wrap tightly on top of it and then make sure the top is closed airtight. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't see any.
So I want to thank everyone for joining today's class. The royal icing cookies are great for dessert tables, for party favors. I mean, this would be great for a bridal shower. You could just package them in the cellophane clear bags with a little tie, and it would be absolutely adorable. Okay, so someone asked what the pencil decoration was for. So the pencil decoration was just to add extra highlight to the petals. So you'll see a difference here where this one looks a little bit more orangey and it just gives like a little bit of more highlight and definition and makes it more look realistic. You don't have to do that. It's just an added step, but you wait for the royal icing to dry completely before you can do that. And I just brushed a little bit of the yellow and then a little dots of orange and used a paintbrush to blend the colors together. So that's the difference between using the marker on top of it and then keeping it plain. They're both beautiful, so it's up to you. So my next class, what is a good recipe for the cookies? Definitely you can Google this and look up sugar cookie recipes that don't spread, so that especially when you're decorating specific shapes for cookies, you don't want them to spread when they bake. You want them to remain the same size. So just look up a no spread sugar cookie recipe and you'll find loads of them. But I did want to say that my next class is also going to be a cookie decorating class. It just got up on the site that you guys can sign up for. And it is cookies that look like little pies, which are adorable. And we're going to use the royal icing mix again, and we're going to use glitter glaze to give it that effect that makes it look like it's real fruit underneath. And we're going to do little lattice tops. They're really adorable. So I hope you guys sign up for that class to join me for those. But thank you for joining me today. And if there's no other questions, I hope you all, oh, someone else has another question. What brand is the icing? This is Satin Ice. All of the products that we use today is our Satin Ice brand. The Satin Ice Royal Icing Mix, the Satin Ice Food Color Gels, and the Satin Ice Food Color Markers. So this is all available at your local Michael shops. Okay. So again, thank you all for joining me today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.